So I'm just looking at a specification for laying underground cables, and we're just going to look at how we can build some of these duct banks using template technology in Open Roads Designer, so we can apply these to our utility feature definitions. And if we scroll down a little bit further, you can see we've got the standard cover and bedding requirements for the conduits. And a little bit further down here, you can see we've got all the standard sections showing the backfill material, our bedding, and the configuration for the duct mounts showing the rows and columns of our conduits with the spacing. And also we've got polymeric cable covers, and in some cases actually we've got warning tapes. So let's look at how we can build a typical template in Open Roads Designer. So I've already created my 9-way bank template, but let's just delve into the components a little bit more. I've got a bedding component, and you can see that we've got a feature definition for that bedding, so we can get quantities out from this. But if I also look at this in more detail, you can see that the shape of this actually will match the utility dimensions that we set up in our feature definition. So again, we're able to use this for clash detection. Above that, I've got a component for the cable cover. So again, I set another different material for that. So again, we can extract this with our quantities. And then I've also set up two end conditions to search for the active surface. You can see here it's cut. I've given it a name. Let me just close that down, because I've also got applied to that another component, which is a stripping component. And in this case, I'm specifying the top option to follow the surface, the bottom option to follow component. Now, how does that work? Well, if I just come in and test this, you can see that we're always displaying the duct bank there, but as the ground, we get further into cut, you can see as the end conditions are finding daylight with the ground, but with that stripping component, we can get a volume out for our backfill. So again, a useful tool in the template creation. We've also got our ducts. Again, if I just double click on one of these are relatively new to the Open Roads Designer template technology, because we can actually build components that are circles now. And this component here it's got a parent of the bedding, which is meant I can turn on a void type mesh, and therefore we can remove that circle from the bedding component. So again, if I just come in here, you can also see we've set a radius. I've also set up a parametric constraint for the radius, and we've placed these inside the bedding material. So again, if I just double click on that point, there was the point, which is the placement point for the circle, and you can see I've also set my constraints relative to the bank, relative to the duct bank invert. With this circle, let me just show you how I created that. I just went in and I created a new component, circle, and again, obviously I set the correct component, the correct feature definition. I just eyeballed this in and I placed it. And then, of course, I went in and I changed the values. I put in the radius of the utility. I also set up a parametric constraint, and I just applied that and I closed that. When I move this, let's just move this point. I'm just going to place it in here. Again, all I did was double click on that, and I said that parent component is the bedding. It's a void type, and we just selected the void type mesh. I went apply. And we'll close, and you can see it's now removed that shape from the bedding. So I'm just going to undo that. So by setting up the parametric constraint for the radius of my ducts, if I just come into the active template and we just expand that parametric constraint, you can see that I've set up constraints for the bedding, the half width of the trench, the radius. If I just double click on the radius, and we'll just change that to 0.1, and we've got OK. You can see we can change all of the radii of those 9 ducts with one modification. So that's how we've created our template. We now need to apply this to our feature definition when we create our new utilities. So now let's take a look at setting up a feature definition for this new duct and also applying the template that we've just created. I would normally create this feature definition in a DGN library, but I'm going to set this up in my live utilities file. So let's take a look at the properties of this feature definition. So if we take a look here, we can see that we've got template. So this is where we browse to the template that we've just created. So I'll just come here. There's the 9-way bank template. So I've applied that back into the properties. We can also see that we've got things set up for the function, the network type, single gradient, conduit type is a duct. We've set the shape up as a box. So again, you can see the different drop down options available to us there. The shape orientation, I've set this to invert. And then we've got the conduit table. Now again, this is where we need to set up instances, the descriptions and the sizing for the utility. If you remember the template, we created a component to represent the box around the conduits, the duct bank, so that we could check for clash detection. So we need to match this in the conduit table here. So I've set one up for the 3x3 150 mil. We've set up the rise and the span. Now that is the box size that we've got, and that matches my template library component. I'll set a thickness of 0. And then the other important thing here on the right hand side would be the minimum cover level. I've set that. That's the 750 minimum depth of cover, and then I've added I've approximately added the rise to that value to get the 1.53. So if I close that down, obviously I could set more instances to this conduit table. If I also come down here, you can see I've also added user data extensions. Now this is a very useful option. Again, another great way of adding attributes to this conduit when we place it. And again, you can see I've got some in here. I've got some set up for the approved conduit sizes in the configuration, and these are enumerated user data extensions. How did I set those up? I went into drainage and utilities. If I go to tools, we've got something called user data extensions, and I went into the subservice utilities and I created these 2 user data extensions where I set up the name, the label. We also set up the enumerated data type. We've got a default value there, but if I just select on there for the you can see there for the approved conduit sizes, we've got these set up. And again, if I just come to the configuration, again, look at the values there. We've set up various configurations for our duct banks. So if I just close that down, if I now just check that again, we can see we've got this all set up. We're ready to go and place our conduit. So if I come into the layout, so I've already got some nodes placed, so I just need to select my feature definition, my prefix and the description. I'm going to select my start node, and then as I build this up, I've got some options where I can place curves or bends. Now I'm going to place some bends, so I'm just going to hit Control. As I say, I'm just going to eyeball this in just so we can place the conduits. And then all I need to do is select Control so I can go and pick my connecting node. That's going to create my conduit, and there it is. Again, if I just want to modify this, I can come in and you can see there's my drag curve, so I can come in and I can drag this and play and bend the conduit to get me around that corner. If I also now come and check the quick properties, again we can see trench no. Now this is where we can now go in and we can apply and create the trench. So I'm going to go and select yes. That will apply the template to our trench. Again, if I just come down here now, you can see there's the trench that we've created for the conduit. And again, we can use that in clash detection as required. So let's just take another look at the properties. So if I select my conduit, come across to the properties, If you remember, we'd set up some user data extensions, and to set those up I just need to come into the utility properties. If we come over here, there are my user defined extensions. So I can now come in and I can set the configuration, which was a 3x3, and my conduit size from the approved list was a 150. So again, we've applied that attribution now to the utility. So if I come back into my flex tables, we just open the flex table. There are the electrical lines. If I just double click on that, you can see there is the flex table. If I now come in, I can come across to the edit, and we can pick from our list of attributes that we want to show in the columns. So if you remember, we'd set up our user defined extensions, our UDXs. So there's the approved conduit sizes. I'll move that across, and then we have the configuration. Again, I'll move that across. So you can see these are the preset properties we can send across to the flex table. You can now see there's my UDXs. Again, I can export this out to a file. So if I just want to create some cross sections, I'm just going to come to my open rows modeling. So I can come into dynamic sections. I can locate my conduit, specify left offset, a right offset, pick a station. We're looking at a 1 meter interval here. I can change that to 5 and enter data point, and then I'm just going to open up a view for that section. And if we look at here, we can now start to see the duct bank that we've created. You can also see the components that we created in the template file. So as we come along, we can start to section through our model. Now remember, anything that is in this 3D model will be sectioned. So if I just right click and we come down to locate station by data point. So if I just come around there, take a section here. We can also see that there's the pit that we place in our drainage network and how close we are with our trench for this utility duct. If I want to take some sections down the junction centerline, again, I can just pick the centerline geometry. We'll pick a left offset, we'll pick a right offset. And again, if we just update this cross-section view. So if I now just scroll down the alignment, we can see the position of the trench relative to our drainage network. And so there are our cross sections. What about quantities? And again, we can just come into the reporting here. So I'm just going to go back into the drainage and utilities. And if we come into the reporting, we should be able to get to our quantities. So there are our corridor reports, our reports. So come in here, we can do component quantities. I'll pick the trench, and if I just open this up, we can view the quantities. So there's our cut and our fill, but there's our volume of cut. Now because we specified components with appropriate material, we can see there's the drainage layer, which was the polymeric cable cover. We've also got the fill, and there's the bedding for our conduits. Obviously, I can also report that if required. We can look at a quantity summary, which again gives us a different style sheet. And again, these can all be exported to Excel. We can also save these if we need to out to XML, Excel files, or doc files. I'll just cancel out of that. So the last thing I want to show is conflict detection. So if we come into the tools, we can look at utility conflicts. Again, I'm going to just select the electrical conduit from the left hand side. I've already dragged and dropped that in there, and I want to check these against my stormwater network. So I'm going to bring in the conduits. We've also got the stormwater inlets, our pits. Again, so if I just go onto my global options, we've got a merge tolerance. So if there's conflicts within half a meter of each other, we'll assume that they're one conflict. I'm going to say it's a new conflict. I can process this. You can see we've got some conflicts shown in the display. If I just close that down now, and we'll go into our flex tables. If we look at the conflict table, again you can see we've got all the conflicts, the 4 conflicts that we've got loaded, and there seem to be conflicts between the trench and the drainage network. Again, we can right click to zoom to. What I'm going to do now is I'm just going to close the flex table. I'll also come into my references. Let me just turn off the display of some of the references. There we go. That'll make it a little bit easier to view the conflicts. And again, as I say, just right click, zoom to, right click, zoom to, and we can start to view and highlight these conflicts. And obviously we need to start looking and investigating further if we've got to maybe modify the utilities. I can also send this to a report. So let me just export this, and I'll create a CSV file, and I'll just save this into my out folder in the project. So I can now close down, and let's go and view that report. So we've now got a report output in Excel. There we go. So there are all our conflicts. So we can create an audit trail as we start to modify the position of the utilities and rerun the clash detection. If we take a look at the 3D view here, and we can spin around using the rotation, we've got the clashes, we've got the existing drainage network, and we can show the issues that we've got with the trench of our 9 duct utility bank. So by turning off information, turning on information, playing with the different display styles, this will enable us to analyze and view our issues.